It was a party worth 500,000 reais, filled with elite guests and mouth-watering catering, while my son, fighting a cruel illness, was left with nothing but empty promises of help. They toasted to life, oblivious to the despair etched on my face as I begged for a chance for my little boy. When the last balloon popped and the music faded, I realized that the only way to save my son was to confront them on my own. In a moment of desperation, I made a decision that would change everything. My name is Juliana, and I wouldn't let my son be forgotten. The next day was a whirlwind of emotions. I felt my heart heavy as I looked at Lucas sleeping peacefully in his bed, unaware of the world around him. He didn't know about the whispered conversations happening in the living room, nor the disdain I felt when ignored by those who should have supported me. I washed my face and took a deep breath.
Trying to summon the courage to face the truth, the party had been a celebration of selfishness, and I needed to find a way to secure treatment for my son. I knew the first thing I had to do was gather information about available options. With a tight chest, I picked up my phone and began researching. An endless list of clinics and specialists appeared before my eyes. Each name I read made me feel more lost, but also more determined. I knew there had to be a solution for Lucas, and I couldn't give up. As the sun started to filter through the window, a new hope blossomed within me. It was time to take action. I knew I wouldn't have my family's support, but I couldn't just sit back and wait for a miracle. As daunting as the idea of facing everything alone was, it was also what made me feel alive. While I researched, my mind wandered to how I could finance the treatment. The party had drained almost all the family's savings, and I couldn't count on Carlos, who had always been absent during critical moments. He was so wrapped up in his own life that he barely noticed the seriousness of Lucas's situation. I started to think about what I could do. Maybe sell some of my belongings, or even look for a temporary job. I didn't have much time, and the urgency to act was becoming increasingly pressing. The idea of talking to Fernanda came to mind, and a thread of hope lit up my thoughts. She had always been a source of support and wisdom. I picked up my phone again and decided to call her. As soon as I heard her voice, the weight I felt lifted a little. I quickly explained the situation, and the concern in her voice was palpable. She always knew how to lift my spirits, and I knew her strength could help me find a way. "Juliana, you're not alone. I'll help you research and find a clinic that can treat Lucas," she said, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. We met later that day. When Fernanda arrived, her worried look calmed me. We talked for hours, analyzing every possibility. She told me about a clinic in another city that had a good track record and could offer treatment at a more affordable cost. My heart raced with renewed hope. As soon as we decided to go there, I made a list of all the questions I wanted to ask the doctors. Today's meeting gave me a new sense of purpose. I talked to Fernanda about what I could do to raise the necessary funds. In a soft voice, she suggested I reach out to some friends. Maybe they could start a fundraising effort. The idea seemed a bit odd, but at the same time, I had nothing to lose. My grandmother always had a special way of connecting people, and the thought of relying on others' kindness felt like a thread of hope amid my despair. The next day, determined, I called a few friends. Some listened attentively and offered help right away, while others hesitated. My heart tightened again when I realized not everyone was willing to support me. But I didn't let that discourage me. I attended a community event, and instead of hiding, I decided to share Lucas's situation. With every word, I felt my voice gaining strength, and the empathy of those around me began to transform into support. I spoke with an older woman who had been through a similar situation. She shared her story of overcoming challenges and offered valuable tips on how to get help. "Sometimes all you need to do is ask," she said. That phrase echoed within me, and I realized that often my own insecurities stopped me from seeking what I truly needed. By the end of the event, I had collected some donations and promises of support. I was overwhelmed and grateful.
The desire to save my son was transforming me. The determination that had awakened in me seemed to grow stronger each day, as if I were being reborn amid the pain. With the money I managed to gather, I decided to go to the clinic Fernanda had mentioned. The trip was long, but the hope of finding a solution for Lucas drove me forward. When I finally arrived, the place was welcoming, and the doctors seemed willing to listen. I explained the situation, and to my surprise, they were understanding. After an initial evaluation, the doctor laid out a plan that could offer hope for my son. As I spoke with the specialist, I felt a wave of relief and gratitude. It was the first time in months that I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. Though the road ahead was filled with challenges, the certainty that I was doing my best for Lucas filled me with courage. The journey was just beginning, but I was ready to face whatever came my way. I was Juliana, and this battle wouldn't end until my son was safe and healthy. The next day arrived like a storm about to break, and anxiety consumed me. As soon as the sun rose, I was already up, looking out the window of my small apartment. The sky was clear, but in my heart, dark clouds loomed. The thought of confronting my family and demanding the support Lucas so desperately needed was terrifying. Carlos, my brother, had always been closer to Fernanda, but I never understood why he didn't seem to care about Lucas's situation. He was more concerned with the image and status the party had provided than with my son's health. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. The first thing I did was call Fernanda. She always had a way of calming me and bringing a bit of light to my dark moments. When she answered, I heard her soft voice. She immediately sensed that something was wrong. "Juliana, what happened?" she asked, her concern evident. I explained the situation, how the party had drained all resources and left Lucas at the mercy of a condition that could be treated but required immediate attention. Fernanda was silent for a moment, and I knew she was processing everything. Then, with the strength that always characterized her, she said, "You need to put yourself first, dear. Lucas needs you, and you need him." The conversation inspired me to take action. After hanging up, I prepared myself for a visit to my mother's house, where the party had been held. It would be a confrontation, but I couldn't let fear take over. What awaited me there could be a battle, but it was a battle I was willing to fight. Upon entering, I noticed that the environment was still filled with memories of that extravagant party. The flowers, the balloons, the remnants of a celebration that now seemed to have little meaning. The contrast with Lucas's critical situation hit me like a punch to the stomach. I found Carlos in the living room, sitting casually as if nothing was happening. He was watching a soccer game on TV, completely ignoring the reality hanging in the air. I approached, taking a deep breath to calm myself. "Carlos, we need to talk," I said, trying to contain the anger boiling inside me. He turned to me, confused but still dismissive. "About what? The party was great. Don't you think?" he replied, with a smile that seemed as out of place as the decorations around us. "It's not about the party, Carlos. It's about Lucas. He needs treatment, and you, like everyone else, turned everything upside down to throw a celebration. Your priority should be his health now." The words spilled from me like a desperate cry, and the silence that followed was almost deafening. Carlos finally seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. The expression on his face changed, but I didn't see the remorse I had hoped for. Instead, he shook his head as if trying to ward off reality. "Juliana, this is complicated. We don't have the money right now. The party was an investment for our image." Those words cut even deeper. Investment. My son's life reduced to a mere number on a financial statement. "Carlos, image means nothing if we don't have what truly matters. Lucas needs help, and you have to understand that. Our family can't continue like this." My voice trembled. But I needed to be strong. What was at stake was not just Lucas's treatment, it was his future. He stood up, visibly frustrated, and began pacing the room. "I don't know how I can help. Our family has its priorities, and you need to understand that it's not simple." I wanted to scream, but I also wanted to cry. It was a struggle in which I felt alone, even with him there. It's not simple because you don't want it to be. We are a family, and that should come first. With each word that left my mouth, a weight was lifted. Carlos looked at me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. I decided I needed more support. I went to Fernanda again, who had always been my anchor amid the chaos. We talked at length about how I could approach my family, and she suggested we hold a meeting. A collective effort might help open their eyes. They need to understand the gravity of Lucas's situation. Unity is our best defense, she said firmly. After reflecting, I agreed. A meeting could be the way to unite forces and make my family see what really mattered. I organized everything with Fernanda's help and set a date. My heart raced, and as the day approached, my anxiety grew, but deep down there was a spark of hope. I knew the fight would be tough, but I wouldn't let my family's indifference dictate Lucas's future. He was the priority, and I would fight for him until the end. When the meeting finally arrived, I was ready to make it clear that our family needed to come together for love, not status. What was at stake was far greater than any extravagant party. It was my son's life, and I wouldn't give up. If you resonate with this journey of love and sacrifice, subscribe to follow the next chapters of this story. Together, we can explore the strength that exists within each of us when we fight for those we love. I knew I needed a plan to get the treatment Lucas so desperately needed. The voices of my family echoed in my mind. With every criticism and every disdain I had heard, it was as if they couldn't see beyond their own priorities. At that party, they had spent an absurd amount, while I struggled to secure what was necessary to save my son. The money that could have changed Lucas's life was wasted on an event that, in the end, seemed to hold no real value. Determined to act was the only choice I had left. I remembered Fernanda, my grandmother, who always had encouraging words for me, even in desperate times. On a rainy afternoon, I sought refuge in her home. As soon as I entered, I felt a warm embrace that only she could provide. The familiarity of the place comforted me, and her presence gave me the courage I needed to keep fighting. "Juliana, what's going on?" she asked, immediately sensing the gravity of the situation. I felt my emotions surge as I spoke about Lucas and the treatment he needed, tears streaming down my face. Fernanda listened intently, her expression one of pure empathy. "You've always been strong, my granddaughter. Remember that the fight for a child is the noblest of all. Don't give up," she said, holding my hand firmly. Her words pierced my heart, and I realized I wasn't alone. She was by my side, even if my family wasn't. After the visit, I began to plan how I could raise the money for the treatment. I knew the first thing I needed to do was distance myself from negativity and focus on solutions. The next step was to talk to doctors and specialists. I sought information on possible treatments and funding options. I was willing to do anything to ensure that Lucas had the chance to live a healthy life. During this search, I discovered many foundations and organizations willing to help children with medical conditions. I began reaching out to them, exposing Lucas's situation. I received responses of support, some of them moving, others just a glimmer of hope in the darkness. Each email I received brought a little more relief to my heart. It was proof that, despite the lack of support from my own family, there were people willing to help those who truly needed it. Meanwhile, the situation at home wasn't improving. Carlos, my brother, seemed increasingly detached from what was happening. He continued to immerse himself in his life and didn't care to understand the gravity of Lucas's health. His distance was palpable, and the indifference hurt me. I couldn't understand how he could ignore his own niece's cane. But the struggle I was fighting gave me a new perspective. I didn't need his approval. What mattered was Lucas's well-being. With each passing day, I felt I was getting closer to securing what Lucas needed. After weeks of phone calls and emails, a foundation agreed to help. They committed to funding part of the treatment, but there was still a long way to go. I knew I couldn't stop now. With Fernanda's support and the newfound strength I had discovered, I pushed forward, determined to do whatever it took to save my son. I started an online fundraising campaign. In each message I wrote, I tried to convey the urgency of Lucas's situation and the impact that help could have on his life. Support began to come from unexpected places. People I had never met contributed, sending messages of encouragement and strength. That solidarity deeply touched me and renewed my hope. In the midst of this whirlwind of emotions and commitments, one night I received a call that would change everything. It was a journalist from a major news outlet who had taken an interest in my story. He wanted to interview me to better understand the situation and, perhaps, help spread the word about the campaign. My heart raced at the thought of reaching more people. I accepted the offer, feeling it could be a turning point. On the morning of the interview, I was filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. As I spoke about Lucas's condition and my family's indifference, I realized I was putting into words all my suffering and my fight. It was as if every word I spoke was a weapon I was using against indifference, and my passion for my son shone through in every sentence. The conversation flowed, and by the end, the journalist assured me that he would publish the article soon. In the following days, the impact was immense. The article spread rapidly on social media, and donations began to increase exponentially. Each notification of contribution felt like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. The community support was overwhelming, and my heart filled with gratitude for everyone who decided to join my cause. However, even with the growing support, Carlos's absence and my family's indifference still troubled me. I couldn't understand how they could remain silent while my world was crumbling. In a moment of weakness, I decided to confront them. I organized a family meeting, feeling that I needed to express the pain I carried. It was time to lay it all out and show them that, despite everything, love is what truly matters. When Carlos arrived, I could see hesitation in his eyes. Sitting together in the living room, I took a deep breath and began to speak. I talked about Lucas, about his health, and what I was doing to help him. The anger and hurt I felt were there, but what I really wanted was for them to understand, to know that by ignoring the situation, they were not only hurting me, but also Lucas, who needed all of us together. The conversation was tense. Carlos tried to justify his absence, but I knew that words were not enough. What I wanted was action, not just empty promises. As a mother, I couldn't wait any longer. My son's future depended on us, and the time to act was now. Looking at them, I realized that regardless of the outcome of that meeting, I had found an inner strength I never knew I possessed. A mother's love is unshakable, and with that, I would continue fighting, whether alone or with the support of those who wanted to be part of this battle. The decision to seek help outside my family was a painful but necessary step. I knew I couldn't depend on their indifference any longer. The phone in my hand felt heavy, but as I dialed the number of the clinic I had researched, a wave of hope began to bloom in my heart. The line rang several times before a gentle voice answered. I explained Lucas's situation, the treatment he needed, and how the urgency of the situation forced me to act. The receptionist, with empathy, guided me through the available options, and each word seemed to breathe life into a new possibility. After the call, I sat in a corner of the room, silently reflecting on everything that had happened. The 500,000 reais party still echoed in my mind, but the idea that I could fight for Lucas in a different way ignited a fire within me. Fernanda, entering the room and noticing my state, approached me, and without needing to ask, she already knew what I needed. She sat beside me, holding my hand as if connecting two parts of a puzzle that had been lost. "You're not alone, my child," she said, her voice soft yet firm. I looked into her eyes and saw a world of support and love, and in that moment, I realized there was still hope. Over the following days, I began to organize everything. I set aside feelings of betrayal, at least momentarily, and focused on how I could gather the money for Lucas's treatment. I made a list of potential income sources, from selling items I no longer used to considering a small community bazaar. Each new idea felt like a new light igniting in the darkness that had enveloped me. The scene of the party, with all its smiles and excesses, seemed so distant and irrelevant now. What mattered was my son's well-being, and this mission became the absolute priority of my life. I began to formulate a plan with Fernanda, who was ready to help in any way necessary. Together, we decided to reach out to the community, talking to friends and neighbors and explaining the situation. I had no shame in asking for help. It was for Lucas, and that made everything different. With my grandmother's words of encouragement ringing in my ears, I felt stronger. That morning, I prepared a poster explaining Lucas's condition and the importance of each contribution, no matter how small. The image of him smiling gave me courage, as I knew I was fighting for something bigger than myself. The day of the bazaar arrived, and adrenaline coursed through my veins. I set up a table at the entrance of my house, filled with clothes and items that had once been mere clutter, but now had a new purpose. With Fernanda by my side, we began to welcome people from the community. Many were willing to help, and the positive energy in the air felt like a balm for my tired soul. With each sale, I felt one step closer to getting what Lucas needed. Smiling and interacting with neighbors, sharing about my son and the importance of the treatment, made me feel more connected to the community than ever. I felt we were all part of something bigger, united by a single desire: to help. The fundraising started to yield results, and soon I had a sum that seemed promising. However, the road was still not easy. When I got home, I found a message from Carlos asking about Lucas. His desire to help seemed contradictory to the indifference he had shown earlier. I was torn between wanting to tell him what I was doing and fearing that he would want to get involved superficially, just to feel better. But the response I truly wanted was a genuine commitment, a willingness to be present in my son's life. After a few days of reflection, I decided to respond to Carlos. I clearly and objectively explained that Lucas was in need of help, that I was doing everything I could, but that the situation was serious. As I sent the message, my heart raced, but it was also full of hope. If Carlos truly cared, perhaps he could change the family narrative. Thus, the wait for his response became a moment of anxiety and anticipation. The doubt of whether he would genuinely care for Lucas or see this merely as a burden was agonizing. Meanwhile, Lucas's treatment was becoming more urgent with each passing day. I knew that every minute lost was one less battle we were fighting together. With every donation I received and every smile I shared at the bazaar, the realization that I wasn't alone grew stronger. The community's support was essential, and I realized that my son wasn't just mine. He was a link connecting us all. The love surrounding him had the power to transform, and I was determined to continue this fight until the end, regardless of whom I had to ask for help. A mother's love had become my armor, and I felt ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. The sun began to set as I decided it was time to act. The party my family had organized was a spectacle of excess, with lavish decorations, a buffet that seemed never-ending, and guests coming and going, laughing and having fun. Meanwhile, in the neighboring house, my son Lucas was in a haunting silence, dealing with his condition without the attention he truly needed. With every laugh that echoed from the party, my heart tightened, reminding me that every cent spent there could have made a huge difference in my boy's life. That's when an idea sparked in my mind, an idea I knew could change everything. If my family was unwilling to help, I would seek support outside of them, in the networks I could weave myself. That night, I sat down with Fernanda, my grandmother, who had always been the voice of reason amid the chaos of my life. I looked into her eyes and saw the concern reflected there. "Grandma, I can't wait any longer. Lucas needs me, and I can't let my family's pride interfere with his health. I need help, and I will find it." Fernanda smiled, a smile that conveyed the strength of years of struggle and perseverance. She took my hand and said, "You are stronger than you think, Juliana. Remember, you are never alone." Those words propelled me like a wave of courage sweeping away my insecurities. The next day, I began searching for resources. I knew I needed a plan. First, I looked for online support groups and found communities dealing with situations similar to mine. Through these networks, I discovered mothers and fathers facing tough battles, but who were willing to share their experiences and advice. Each story I read felt like a breath of hope amid the storm I was facing. One of those mothers, named Anna, was willing to help me. She told me about a foundation that offered financial assistance for medical treatments. When I heard about it, my heart raced. Maybe this is the light I've been searching for, I thought. It was then that I decided to contact the foundation. I was clear and honest about Lucas's condition and the indifference I faced at home. I prepared a document detailing the situation, including photos of Lucas that showed not only his health condition, but also the sparkle in his eyes, the hope that still burned within him. The response from the foundation didn't take long to arrive, and to my surprise, they were willing to help me, but they needed more information. Meanwhile, the weeks dragged on. The party continued to be the focus of my family, and I felt the distance between us growing with each passing day. Carlos, my brother, seemed even more distant, as if the fleeting joy of the party had wrapped him in a bubble, isolating him from reality. One night, I found him sitting on the porch, gazing at the stars. He didn't notice me when I approached. "Carlos," I called, trying to break the silence. He turned slowly, and there was a look of confusion on his face. "You don't see what's happening, do you?" I said, my voice choked. "Lucas needs help, and while everyone is celebrating, he's fighting for his life." Carlos sighed, and for a moment, I saw a crack in his carefree facade. "I know, Juliana, I know," he murmured. "But what do you want me to do? I have no power over their decisions." His response frustrated me, but I realized that the answer wasn't in him. It was in me. I needed to move forward, regardless of what my family felt or did. With the foundation's support, I finally managed to schedule an appointment for Lucas with a specialist who could offer the treatment he needed. The joy I felt upon receiving the confirmation was indescribable. I walked into the kitchen where Lucas was watching his favorite cartoon and hugged him tightly. "You're going to be okay, my love. I'm doing everything I can to help you." He smiled, a shy smile, but I could see the hope lighting up his face. Fernanda's words echoed in my mind, and I realized that despite my family's indifference, I was not alone. The support I found outside my home was becoming a new network of love. The strength I thought I had lost was resurfacing, and I was determined to fight for Lucas until the end. So, with every small victory, I regained a bit of hope, and more importantly, the certainty that amid the chaos, there was always a way forward. However, throughout this process, I realized that the fight wouldn't be easy. Every time I spoke with the foundation, I felt a mix of anxiety and hope. The conversations were lengthy, and time seemed to drag on as if it were playing with my patience. Sometimes, I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. Sleepless nights became common, with my mind racing with worries about how I would secure the next steps of Lucas's treatment. I found myself staring at the ceiling, imagining all the possibilities and paths we could take. And amid this whirlwind of emotions, Fernanda became my lighthouse. On one of those sleepless nights, she brought me a cup of warm tea and sat beside me. "You don't have to carry this alone, dear," she said, her voice soft and reassuring. Her words were like a balm for my restless soul. I knew I needed to allow others to help me, but it was hard to let go of control. As Lucas's treatment began to unfold, the doctor visits became a new rhythm in our lives. I remember the first consultation. The office was a cold environment with white walls and a characteristic antiseptic smell. But when I saw the doctor enter, his presence was warm. He knelt down to Lucas's level and began to talk to him like a friend, not just a patient. That interaction brought me instant relief. I knew my son was in good hands. The treatment began, and although there were difficult days, Lucas always found a way to smile. There was something magical about his resilience, a glow that reminded me that, despite everything, hope still existed. At home, things with the family continued to be tense. The party still happened, and I felt that with every laugh that echoed, a part of me distanced itself from them. But I couldn't let that shake me. The fight for Lucas was my priority. And so, as I navigated through this sea of emotions, I realized that sharing my story was becoming a form of healing. I started writing about everything I was going through, about the joys, the sorrows, and how each small step toward Lucas's treatment was a victory. Over time, I realized that by sharing these experiences, I was not only helping myself, but could inspire others going through similar situations. At this moment, I would like to invite everyone reading this to share their stories. Each of us faces different battles, and by coming together, we can find strength and inspiration in one another. Don't underestimate the power of your voice. It can be the light someone needs in their darkness. That night, when the lights from the party still shone in my memory and the laughter echoed in my mind, I sat at the kitchen table, my head resting in my hands. The silence of the house was deafening, and I couldn't escape the reality surrounding me. Lucas was sleeping in his room, his breathing light and calm, contrasting with the storm of thoughts that tormented me. I felt that, while life pulsed within him, I was battling a sea of indifference that rose around me. Carlos's absence made everything even more painful. He hadn't just been an absent father, he was now also a brother unwilling to fight for my son's life. Every decision he made, every step he failed to take to help Lucas, felt like a dagger plunged into my heart. I couldn't understand how he could distract himself with parties while I was on the brink of a crisis. Fernanda, who had always been my safe harbor, sat beside me, sensing my state of mind. I needed her words, but I was no longer sure they would be enough to comfort me. "Juliana, you are stronger than you think," she said in a soft but firm voice. "Sometimes people don't see what's right in front of them. They get lost in their own lives." I listened to her, but there was a part of me that felt empty, as if everything I did was in vain. "What do you intend to do now?" she asked, looking into my eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right answer. It wasn't just about my desire to fight. It was a matter of survival for Lucas. "I'm going to find the treatment he needs, no matter what happens," I declared, feeling a wave of determination welling up inside me. The following morning brought with it a new hope. I woke up with an idea pulsating in my mind. If my family was unwilling to help, I needed to find a way to get the necessary money. The idea of creating a fundraising campaign struck me, and I decided it was time to act. I started to sketch out a plan, putting on paper Lucas's story, what he was facing, and how people could contribute. Throughout the day, I looked for ways to make this possible. I set up an account for donations and wrote a heartfelt message explaining our situation. I knew it was a risk, but I had to try. I didn't care if it meant exposing my vulnerability to the world. What mattered was Lucas. In the days that followed, I shared the campaign on social media, among friends, and even on community pages. Support began to trickle in slowly. Some people were touched, while others offered to help spread the word. Meanwhile, Carlos and my family's apathy continued to hurt me. Knowing they were living their lives normally while Lucas was fighting for his made me furious. In a moment of weakness, I thought about confronting them. But what would that solve? Instead, I decided my focus should be on Lucas and ensuring he received the necessary treatment. After a week of anguish and struggle, my campaign began to gain traction. Donations started to increase, and with each contribution, a new hope blossomed in my heart. One day, upon opening my email, I found a message from a stranger that deeply moved me. He spoke about how Lucas's story had inspired him to be grateful for the health of his own family and that he felt compelled to help. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. It was a small reminder that even in tough times, love and solidarity still existed. With the growing support, I started to feel less alone in this fight. Interactions with donors made me realize there was a world beyond my pain and that many people cared. Through encouraging messages, I found a new strength. A woman who had gone through a similar situation offered me valuable advice and even committed to helping organize a fundraising event in our community to raise more funds. That filled me with hope. Finally, I felt I was doing something meaningful and that a mother's love could overcome any obstacle. Over time, Lucas began to notice that something was happening.
He would sit beside me and ask questions about what I was doing. Children have a way of picking up on things, even if they don't fully understand. "Mom, are you going to make me better?" he asked one day, with his big, hopeful eyes. I couldn't hold back the tears as I looked at him. "Yes, my love, we are fighting together, and I promise I will do everything in my power." His trusting expression gave me a renewed energy, and I knew I needed to keep going, not just for him, but for myself. The fight wasn't just about getting money. It was about confronting indifference, proving to myself that I was capable of changing the course of history. The weeks dragged on, but with each step, my certainty that I could help my son grew. Fernanda was always by my side, supporting me and offering words of encouragement. Over time, love and solidarity began to manifest in ways I never expected. Every gesture of support, every donation, was like a brick I was laying in the construction of a better future for Lucas. And so, day by day, I grew stronger and more determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead.